Hello, good morning. Welcome back to the Wake Up Call. 8:34 is the time, and this morning we have with us for a very brief moment, which means we have to go straight to the point. Mr. Jim Thomas, attorney at law. Hello, good morning, and welcome back. It's been a while.
Indeed, it has. I wondered
I
if you
wondered
had
if you had
abandoned
abandoned
me
me.
Oh no, absolutely not. I would never do that, Mr.
because you like to
Thomas.
be on the program.
All
Here's a
right,
Here's a
fact.
funny
I don't
fact.
know
I
where it's
don't know
coming.
where it's coming.
maybe you can turn down your volume. All right, so maybe your phone, you turn that down, and that should be okay.
Okay.
That's good. All right. Or if you have headphones nearby.
Let's see.
No? Okay. So let's get into it, see how much we can get out as much as possible. So this morning we're gonna talk about reparations very briefly. It's like a crash course on the wake up call. So first things first, we're gonna start with what is well no, before that. You are the former chair of the SVG Reparations Committee. Let's just get that out there. All right? Good.
Yes.
So we're gonna talk about first and foremost the definition. What is reparations? It's been a talk, well, for a good couple of years, and I know that you were the champion for that. But it made it for, especially most recently when the Royals came to visit on April 23rd. What is reparations?
Right. Well,
Right. Well,
reparations
reparations
is
is
the
the
notion
notion
that a wrong had
wrong
been
had been
committed
committed
and there
and there
needs to be
needs to be
some
some
repair.
repair.
It's to
It's to
say that
say that
people have been
people have been
injured,
injured
and where
and
there's
where
an
there's an
injury,
injury,
there's need
there's
for
need for
report.
reward.
So, for
So, for
example, the
example, the
Caribbean
Caribbean
Commission
Commission
was
was
formed by the
formed by the
Caribbean
Caribbean
governments
in
in 2013
2013
to set up
to
a
set up a
10
10
reparations
reparations
program,
program,
which
Mm-hmm.
which
speaks
speaks
to
to
a
a
lot of
lot of
justice
justice
issues
issues
having to
having to
do
do
with
with
debt
debt
relief,
relief,
establishment of
establishment of
transport,
transport,
repatriation
repatriation
of
of
those
those
who
who
are
are
here in
here in
America
Europe
who
who
want
want
to
to
go
go
back
back
to
to
the
the
continent
continent,
unopportunity,
unopportunity,
and
and
some form
some
of
form of
compensation
compensation
for
for
the
the
injury which
injury which
African
African
ancestors
ancestors
crossed over
crossed over
suffered.
suffered.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So why is reparations important?
Well, it's
Well, it's
fundamentally
fundamentally
important
important
because
because none of
there's
his
American
American
truth
troops
called
called
Oliver
Oliver
Wendell Holmes.
Wendell,
And Oliver
and
Wendell
Oliver Wendell
Holmes says
says
where
where
there's
there's
injury in
injury in
rightful
rightful
reward.
born,
And I
and
don't
I
think
don't
there's
think there's
anyone who
one
would
who
doubt
would doubt
that
that
African
African
people
people
have
have
been
been
enslaved,
enslaved,
they
they
have
have
been engaged in
engaged in the
transatlantic
transatlantic slave
trade.
trade.
There's
There's
tremendous
tremendous
genocide
genocide
between
between
12 and
12 and
25
25
million
million
African
African
people
people
brought
brought
out of
out
the
of the
continents
continents
and
and
over
over
here
here
into the
into
New
the New
World.
World.
And
And
as a
as a
consequence,
consequence,
people died, people were
people were
tortured,
tortured,
people were
people
killed
were
through
killed
the
through
war.
the war.
I mean,
I mean, some of the most common things.
in fact,
In fact, the
African
African
slavery
slave trade
is
is
probably
probably
the
the
worst
worst
Holocaust
Holocaust
in the
in the
history
history
of the
of the
world.
world.
And
And
as a
as a
consequence of
consequence of
that,
that,
there have
there
been a
have been a
number of
number of
people in
people
the
in the
last
last
century,
century,
or
or
actually
actually
even
even
years
years
of the
of the
enslaved
enslaved
Africans
Africans
themselves
themselves
who
who
have
have
argued
argued
we
we
need to
need
get
to
some
get some
compensation
compensation
for
for
the
the
injuries
injuries
we
we
have
have
suffered.
suffered.
How do we go about getting compensation though? Because I know that we talk about reparations a lot and what needs to be done, but how do you go about it?
Right.
I know you had a protest to sort of enlighten and uh, to bring awareness to it, but how do you exactly go about getting it or trying?
Excellent.
Excellent.
I
I
think
think
we all
we all
know,
know,
but at
but
least
at
those
least
of us
those
in
of
the
us that are
reparations movement
movement
are
are
convinced
convinced
that
that
reparations is fundamentally a struggle for power. Those who have power, those who are organized would get it. So, for example, in the early 20th century, the Jewish, no, actually in 1996, 1997, Jewish people got reparations. They brought a case against the German government, big insurance companies, and so on. And they were able to receive billions of dollars in reparations. Part of the reasons why they were able to receive that is because the Clinton administration uh, decided it's going to throw its weight behind the Jewish effort. And you can't have more gravitas, you don't have more heft than the US government. So once the US government put its weight behind that, the German government and many of the European insurance companies settled and paid out billions and billions of dollars to Jewish people. We know the Korean people of New Zealand got some form of reparations. The people in the Canadian indigenous people, Inuit people, have gotten some forms of reparation. The Indian government is now looking for reparations for the genocide which was committed by the British in the state of Kerala in, I think it was 1913. So there has been some movement on the reparations front. In fact, before I returned to St. Vincent in 2004, I was part of a big reparations case in the United States where a team of lawyers, including myself, sued um, insurance companies, Aetna, US Life, Fleet Boston, the bank, Davis Harriman, a big manufacturing gun company. We sued a number of these companies for reparations because they were directly involved or they benefited in some ways from the enslavement of African Americans. And the case went all the way up to the Fifth Circuit in the United States in the federal system, and just Justice Kegel dismissed it on the ground that it was too remote. That, oh, slavery was all the way back then. It was abolished in 1863 in the United States. A similar argument is made in the Caribbean, except to say those persons who tell us that slavery was remote ought to know that in 1832, in preparations for the emancipation of enslaved Africans in the Caribbean, the British government borrowed 20 million pounds, which today is the equivalent of $200 billion, to pay the enslavers, the persons who enslaved African people. They were paid 20 million pounds. In addition to that, that period which we know when we were in primary school as the apprenticeship period between 1834 and 1838, it is estimated that the enslavers got an additional 27 million pounds. So we ourselves had to pay for our freedom to the tune of 27, to add to the 20 million pounds which the British paid. So the enslavers actually got 47 million pounds. And so they got all of that money. We never got anything at all. So the battle now, the fight now, is to ensure that those persons who suffered so much, and there's no denying. I mean, African people who were brought from the continent, we lost our names, we lost our history, we lost our culture, we lost our religion, we lost our spirituality. We were denuded, and it's the only people in the history of the world where that has happened to in such a systemic and systematic manner. So that is where the struggle is. When I returned to St. Vincent in 2004, in 2005, we formed what was called the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Reparations Movement. And then in 2013, when when CARICOM adopted the fight or took up the fight for reparations, Prime Minister Gonzalez constituted the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Reparations Committee, of which I was made chairman. So that's where we are on that.
So, what are they doing to advance the case for reparation nationally and
When you
regionally?
say what are they doing, what do you mean?
The
They meaning who?
reparations, the National Reparations Committee.
Well, the National Reparations Committee over the years have done a host of things, mainly around issues of getting people to understand the case, because we have always been of the view that the British has a case to answer. They have a case. They committed genocide in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For those of us who don't know, remember when the British tried to conquer St. Vincent, our people fought after the in 1773. St. Vincent was given off to the British, and the British tried to conquer St. Vincent, well, to try to occupy St. Vincent then. But there were a series, decade-long fight of resistance, and this culminated in 1795 with the assassination of Paramount Chief Joseph Chatoyer. But that fight had always been going on. By the 1860s, our people were up in rebellion again. In 1935, we were up in rebellion again. So there's that long history. And then so once the committee was formed, the reparations movement in 2005 and then the reparations committee in 2013, a lot of the work was to bring people to the level of consciousness to understand where we were. for them to understand that back in 1797, when our people were conquered, 5,000 of them were captured and placed on Baliso and then exiled. And many of them went up to this island just off Belize called Rotan. And from there, they went to places like Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and later on in the 20th century, many of them settled in California and Texas and New York and so on and so forth. The brilliant thing about exile, if ever there's something brilliant about exile, is that those people who were exiled maintain the culture. In fact, they continue to this day to speak the language that our people used to speak in the 1800s. And I can tell you, in 2014, it was the most amazing thing to me that I had gone to a reparations conference in New York in the Bronx, and there were about 200, 300 Garifuna people there, and all of them were able to converse in the language of our country, which they call Urumi. And I was the only person who had lived and who continues to live in the land, but I didn't know a word. It was just a phenomenal thing. It really brought me, it was an emotional thing for me because it showed what colonization really is and the harm that it does. So we have been going around the country, talking to people, bringing that history to people, explaining that the British had committed crimes of genocide and that they have a case to answer. So that's what a lot of the work, went to schools, we went to community centers, we went to churches, and so on and so forth. So that's where the work has gone. And then the reparations committee is also part of the Caribbean Reparations Commission, and a lot of work has been done in that regard as well. It's as the chairman of the Caribbean Reparations Commission, Hilary Beckel, says, this fight for reparations is not a sprint; it's a marathon. It's going to take us some time. We're going to get there.
Right, right,
Quick one,
right.
right?
Oh,
How did your journey with reparation begin, though? What keeps you motivated to
Well,
pursue?
I came to a level of consciousness from very early that by the time I was about 13 or 14, in those days, I was still at Catholics, the Roman Catholic school, and then I was fortunate enough, or unfortunate, if you would say, to get to go to secondary school at age 15, which is a time when most people are getting ready to graduate from secondary school. But when I got into St. Martin's, there was an organization then called Organization for Unity and Rights of Students, which was formed, which was like a youth arm for a militant organization in St. Vincent called the Yulu United Liberation Movement, headed by people like Renwick Rose and Caspar London, and later on Ralph Gonzalez. So I started reading a lot then, and it really came to me on August 1st, 1975. I remember Ralph Gonzalez made a presentation at the Peace Memorial Hall. Brilliant address in my mind. And he spoke for like about 75 minutes. He didn't read, he just spoke extemporaneously. And I remember at the end of it, I went to Renwick Rose, whom we call Camaro Rose, and asked him, wow, how did he do that? I mean, I was still very young, 16 at the time. And I said, how did he do that? And I remember Renwick says, well, Comrade Jomo, if you want to be like that, you have to read. I never look back. I have been reading ever since. So that's where my consciousness came from. And I pay a lot of attention. I read a lot of newspapers. Even to this day, I mean, on a daily basis, I would read newspapers from South Africa, from Israel, from the United States, from across
okay.
the region, because I really, really want to know stuff. And, the ancient Africans say, he who knows that he knows little knows the most. So once you know little, you would go out to try to find even more information.
You let.
Okay.
Uh,
I wanted to ask
mhm.
something pertaining to what you said about the Jews having U.S. To give them support. Who do we have as Caribbean people?
Who do we have what? I didn't get the question.
The Jews had the support of the U.S.
Right,
right at the time that they were successful in getting reparations. Right.
right, right.
Who can we get, or who do we have?
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, the Jews had a powerful country, the United States. We don't have any country supporting us. I mean, this is a Caribbean government project, right? In 2013, the Caribbean government's CARICOM said that it is going to take up the fight for reparation. It's an amazing thing for these governments to do. It's almost analogous to back in 1972 when Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, and Guyana decided that they were going to break out of the American embargo of Cuba and recognize Cuba. because back then the Cubans had made a revolution and the Americans had literally isolated. It is that big. And the governments in 2013 said, we are going to fight for reparation. There has been tremendous pushback from the big, powerful countries, and it come in subtle ways. It can come in a way where St. Vincent applies for a loan, and guy says, look, if you press this really hard, we are not going to give you this loan. So that could have come through the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, wherever they can pull their levers to put pressure on government. And I'm sure that is what has happened. So, for example, many of the governments still have not formed uh, national reparations commissions, committees. Many of
But
those who have formed them, as in St. Vincent, for example, never really give a lot of material support to it. For example, in the I was chairman from 2013 until last year, when the government says that if you're not vaccinated, you have to get off their committees. Um, I was the government of St. Vincent never once give a budget to do the work for reparations. So there's a rhetorical commitment to it, and they give money to the Caribbean Reparations Commission to do some work. But at the local level, a lot of times we don't get the kind of support. But we, in the time when I was the chairperson, and Curtis King, as I mentioned to you, Crystal, is the deputy chair, we did a lot of work going around the country trying to get things done.
You led a protest for reparations during the last visit of the royals. What
Right.
influence do you think the royal family can have on British politicians to advance the case for reparations?
Well, they can have a lot of influence if they want to, but the British, they don't care. I mean, that's an elite club. They don't care. People don't know that in 1570, I think it's 1571, it was the the the, the, the monarch that formed the royal charter that allowed British people to go into Africa and snatch and kidnap our ancestors and bring them over here. They benefited from it financially. So when, for example, Diana's son turned 30, their grandmother was able to give them, each of them, 30 million pounds. Some of that came from the enrichment which they got from trafficking in human bodies, from trafficking in the African Holocaust. So when we protested, and this is when we were doing the organizing meetings for the protest against Sophie and Edward, my position was a lot of this is not so much for the royals because they don't care. This is about our people getting an understanding that reparations is due, bringing again to the fore the issues why St. Vincent is so underdeveloped today is directly connected to the fact that the British and the French, they engage in a concerted effort to ensure that our country remain poor and underdeveloped. When the British conquered St. Vincent in 1797, the first thing they did was to map the country. They calculated that we had like about 100,000 acres of land, and they share it up among their friends. So our people, our indigenous people, Garifuna and Kalinago people, were disenfranchised. So the protests into colonialism, reparations now, did you bring our check? All of that was mainly for our people because they don't really care. If they had any care at all in the world, the Queen would say, some of the millions, we can give it to St. Vincent, we can give it to Jamaica. We need to understand that in the 17th and 18th century, the Caribbean was said to be the prime piece of real estate in the world because it was so profitable. When the British paid 20 million pounds in 1834 at emancipation, that 20 million pounds at that time amounted to 40% of the GDP of the UK at the time. That 20 million pounds was plowed back into the British economy, which helped to propel the Industrial Revolution. So when you go to London or you go to Liverpool or you go to Bristol or you go to Manchester and you see all of these magnificent edifices,
that's
that's
of my
our sweat, that's our blood. And that's why we're saying we want some of that back.
Right. I just wanna. I'm gonna put two questions in one.
well, just to give you a time check, Jomo,
Yeah.
you have about a minute left. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What form do you think reparation should take place, and do you think reparation will come in your lifetime?
Um, I think it should come in. I think that it should reparations should come in a multiplicity of forms. I am not going to specify. I am not one who say we have to lock it. This is why the Caribbean Reparations Commission talks about a developmental conversation with the persons who perpetuated that crime of underdevelopment against us. So let us think about a multiplicity of ways in which reparations can come, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's infrastructural development, whether it's a big, huge check that we could have an endowment fund and we can draw on it when we have things to do. Any of those could work for me. Would reparations come in my lifetime? I don't know. But in 1833, if you had asked African people, enslaved African people in the Caribbean, whether emancipation would come in 1834, they probably would say no. If you had asked people in the Caribbean in 1960s whether independence would come to Jamaica in 62 and Trinidad in 62 and Guyana in 66 and Barbados in 66 or even in SPG in 79, they probably would have said no. But I'll tell you this in closing. The great Guyanese poet Martin Carter says that he's confident of the victory of the people. He said he may not live to see it, but he's so confident that he knows if he does not see it, his children would see it. And if his children does not see it, he's confident. He's very, very confident that his grandparents will see it. And that's the approach that I take on these questions.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas, for taking the time out to
Thank
step
you
in.
so much for giving the opportunity.
Not a problem. Hopefully, we can continue at another time because there's so many
Yes.
things to talk about,
Once you, once you
including
call me, I would. Once you call me, I would answer.
okay, thanks.
Thank
Including modern day slavery. All right. Anyways, that's just a preamble for the next session. Okay. Have a
All right.
wonderful day and thank you so
Good.
much.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
All
Good.
Have a
right.
good one.
Woo! Crash course on a what is today? Tuesday? Crash course on a
No
Tuesday
pun intended.
morning. Okay. Well, also, yeah, that one flew over my head. I can't believe that. But it's, don't anything like it. Don't anything like
No,
it.
no, no.
Let me take another like 2 minutes
Okay,
and to
okay.
just soak that in. Let it just soak in for
That
a
was a
bit. Like
question
when
I
it's
really wanted to
seasoning
ask.
chicken.
That was one I wanted to ask. You feel like we should just forget about
You
reparations?
matter what?
Let's for-
No.
forget about it. Build our own
Never.
society and
Never, never, never,
communities.
never, 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 never. You know why? Because it's an injustice to our current
Hmm.
people and our future generations. Blatant injustice. How everybody else gets it, except we was goodbye to we. What happened to black people?
Mean slavery done gone. 200
It's
years?
gone. But let me. Oh boy,
It's
mini rant
abolished, not
coming.
gone.
Mini rant loading.
It's abolished.
So physical slavery might have ended.
Uh-huh.
Right? They might have abolished it. They might have given us independence. They might have said, all right, you could get this, that, and terror. But we still have to beg for a lot of things. We still have to beg for opportunities to send our children off to university. We still have to beg for money to build bridges and fix roads and to develop our economy. We still have to beg for a lot of those. And you know why we have to beg it? Because other people exploited our people in the beginning. You ever read you ever
I
read
just had the
what
music stop right
happened?
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should never stop because our people have to wake up. And another reason why we should continue until the day we die. Slavery, the effects of slavery are still with our people today. Mental slavery is what is keeping us back right now. When you say black man fighting against another black man, what do you think that is? Huh? How the home is structured right now, what do you think that is? There's so many subtle things within our society. And you know the funny thing is, pay attention to the society of other Caribbean islands and you will see a common thread. Very similar. Almost too similar. Very similar. We get upset with our Caribbean men. We get upset with our Caribbean women. We talk about the way we parent and how we have to fix that. And we have to right the historical wrong. And we have to keep in the past or get rid of generational
Courses.
curses, right? Look around and see the people who have wealth, especially as if it's in the Grenadines. Look at it. And you tell me we should stop fighting for this thing? You mad or what? Never, 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 never. Our culture has gone. I don't even know a single term. You could tell me today, tomorrow, I forget a single term in Gary phone. I don't know. And today is when we starting to talk about teaching it in school stupidness. Or people have gone, everything gone.
Well,
Like they
we're
took that
starting
from
from
black people in
somewhere.
Africa. They just piled them up on one another in a boat. You like they were just defecating on people below them. Sickening, and we must stop. Never. Diseases were so rampant. They raped us, they killed us, they slaughtered us in front of our families back then. This is obviously from what I've read, because
Yeah.
but still, we should never stop. No, no, boss. No, no, no.
Mm.
Don't ever listen. Educate yourself on where you come from. Educate yourself. Many of the things that you're doing right now, you don't even know why you're doing it. The effects of slavery, they tell us. I remember going to an MC. It's your fault, and you saw me with this ranty. I remember going to an MC. Uh, what do you call those things? The word just slipped me there. A few years ago, workshop. Oh,
Mm.
what a silly little word. An MC workshop, and the gentleman from Barbados, I cannot remember his name, but he was speaking about slavery. The effects of slavery would last for hundreds of years. And that kind of just hit me to my core. I'm like, eh. And one of the interesting things about it is that we tend to look at it kind of one-sided, right? Especially when you talk about like racism and so on. But we look at it, well, not racism, slavery. When you're talking about slavery, we look at it a bit one-sided. Sometimes we forget that prejudice, right? So slaves pass down to the family, to the next generation, to the next generation, certain things that they were taught and forced upon them, right? But what about the masters? They were taught how to treat the slaves, right? Which were black people. And they pass that down from generation to generation to generation. So while we're out there trying to fix the black mind or the slaves passed down or inherited mind, and yes, some people are waking up, but we also need to talk about changing the mindset of the ones that enslaved us. And I think that is probably a bigger task than changing the mindset of the inherited enslaved person, if that makes any sense to you. Anyways, I done rant. My apologies. I know you're good.
I was like, yeah, a moment there.
Yeah, I had a little moment there. Oh wow, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. It's your fault. I'm gonna blame you. Okay,
Not
we're gonna
not
take a
saying, not
break
saying.
on the. We're gonna take a break. We're coming back. I'm gonna drink some water or something. Okay. It's not funny, man. It's not funny. It's alright, but it just gets me upset. Like it just really gets me upset. And black people these days have to be fighting to build wealth, and that's so unfair. We have to be fighting, and many of us are economically struggling, and we just have to be killing up ourselves to just get something, and to pass down, to be able to pass on generational wealth to our offspring, our children and grandchildren. When And you see, people who come from privilege, they have a very different narrative, and they can't speak like people who do not come from privilege.
Hmm.
And it's not the same narrative. It's
Because
not the
some
same
people
thing.
don't
You could
really,
empathize, but you can't. It
some,
can't.
some people really don't care about these stuff though.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. I mean, you should.
I don't think a lot of persons really care about this stuff. They
It's
just go
sad.
about their everyday life. Okay, I had to make it.
Let me guess. Go about your everyday life killing up yourself to get something, right? And then you become a slave to the banking system
Hmm.
because you have to pay a loan at the end of the month. You trying to acquire wealth when really and truly where we're walking should have been ours.
Hmm.
Not so?
Oh well.
Yeah.
Let's go for a quick one.
Yeah.
We'll be
It's a bit
back.
tense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
Wake you up in the morning. It's a wake up call. What's wrong with you? All right. Well, we're going now.